The cold metal of the shotgun pressed against her temple was the moment Josephine Caldwell realized her life would never be the same. Her father's rage had finally pushed beyond threats to action, and with the barrel digging into her skin, she made a choice that would forever alter her fate. This was 1876, and in the Colorado Territory, a woman had precious few options, but Josephine was determined to find hers. "You'll marry Thomas Wilson, and that's final," her father snarled, the stench of whiskey strong on his breath as he lowered the shotgun. His fathers agreed to forgive my debts. The wedding's in a week. Josephine's hands trembled as she smoothed her skirts, trying to maintain what little dignity remained. At 20 years old, she had endured her father's escalating cruelty since her mother's death 3 years prior. Marriage to Thomas, a man twice her age with a reputation for breaking more than just horses, wasn't just undesirable. It was a death sentence of a different kind. "Yes, father," she whispered, eyes downcast as her mind raced with plans of escape. That night, by candlelight in her small bedroom above her father's mercantile in Denver, Josephine penned a desperate response to an advertisement she'd secretly clipped from a newspaper weeks before. A rancher near Telluride seeking a bride, a stranger who couldn't possibly be worse than the fate that awaited her. Seeking practical arrangement with respectable rancher. Can cook, sew, and manage household affairs. Available immediately. Reply to Denver Post Office, Box 217. 3 days later, she slipped away to collect the response that would change everything. "Miss Caldwell will meet Denver train station Friday noon. Bring what you can carry. Marriage by judge upon arrival in Telluride. Fare enclosed. Lucas Stone." The note was brief, the handwriting strong and clear. Josephine pressed the paper to her chest, heart pounding. Friday was tomorrow, the day before her arranged marriage to Thomas Wilson. It was madness to flee with a stranger, yet staying meant certain misery. Before dawn the next morning, Josephine packed her mother's silver hairbrush, a small portrait of her mother, 2 dresses, and what little money she had saved from working in her father's store. She slipped out while he lay in a drunken stupor, leaving behind everything she'd ever known. The Denver train station bustled with activity as Josephine clutched her small valise, scanning the crowds nervously. Her father would discover her absence soon. If he found her before the train departed, she'd face worse than a shotgun to her temple. "Miss Caldwell." She turned to find a tall man regarding her with cautious eyes. Lucas Stone stood before her, his appearance nothing like she'd imagined. He wasn't an old man desperate for a housekeeper, as she'd feared. Perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin that spoke of outdoor work and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were practical but clean, a simple button-down shirt, worn leather vest, and denim trousers tucked into boots that had seen many miles. "Mr. Stone," Josephine's voice wavered. He nodded once. "Train leaves in 20 minutes. You certain about this arrangement?" His directness was jarring but somehow comforting after years of her father's manipulation and lies. "I am." Josephine straightened her spine, meeting his gaze directly. "Are you?" Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Yes, madam. Let's board then." As the train pulled away from Denver, Josephine felt both terror and exhilaration. She was fleeing one prison and possibly entering another, but at least this one was of her own choosing. The journey to Telluride was spent in mostly silence. Lucas Stone wasn't a talkative man, but his quiet presence beside her felt oddly protective rather than threatening. When he did speak, it was to offer practical information about his ranch, 10 miles outside of town, 300 acres. Cattle mostly. Small house but solid. Creek runs through the property. Town's growing with the mines, but we're far enough out to avoid the worst of it. "And you've been there long," Josephine ventured. 8 years, came west after the war. She wanted to ask which side he'd fought for but thought better of it. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its wounds remained fresh for many. No family, she asked instead. Parents gone. Brother in Kansas. His answers were clipped efficient. I should tell you, Josephine said carefully, I'm leaving behind a difficult situation. My father, your reasons are your own, Lucas interrupted gently. We all come west for something. Running to or running from doesn't much matter once you're here. When they arrived in Telluride the following day, Josephine was struck by the rugged beauty surrounding the small mining town. Nestled in a box canyon, dramatic peaks rose on 3 sides, their snow-capped summits gleaming in the afternoon sun. The town itself was a collection of wooden buildings along a muddy main street, nothing like Denver, but vibrant with the energy of a place being built by sheer determination. True to his word, Lucas took her directly to the judge, a gruff man named Hollister who conducted the brief ceremony in his office above the general store. Josephine's hands trembled as she signed the marriage certificate, making her Josephine Stone with a few strokes of a pen. Congratulations, Judge Hollister said without enthusiasm. $5 Stone. Lucas paid, and just like that, Josephine was a married woman. Need anything from town before we head to the ranch? Lucas asked as they stepped back onto the street. Josephine shook her head, still dazed by how quickly her life had transformed. Yesterday she'd been Josephine Caldwell, prisoner in her father's house. Today she was Josephine Stone, wife to a rancher she'd known for less than 36 hours. The ranch was exactly as Lucas had described, modest but solid. The house was a simple 2-story structure with a wide porch facing the mountains. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and in the distance, cattle grazed on green pastures fed by the creek. It's beautiful, Josephine said truthfully as Lucas helped her down from the wagon. It's work, he replied, but she caught a flicker of pride in his expression. I'll bring your things inside. The interior of the house was clean but Spartan, a main room with a stone fireplace, simple wooden furniture, and a kitchen with a cast iron stove. Upstairs, 2 small bedrooms and a washroom completed the home. This will be your room, Lucas said, setting her valise on a bed covered with a faded quilt. I'm across the hall. Thought you'd want your own space to start. Josephine blinked in surprise. My own room. This isn't that kind of arrangement unless you want it to be. His voice was matter of fact. I needed someone to help run this place, cooking, keeping house, maybe helping with the books. You needed to get away from whatever you were running from. Seems fair to give you time to adjust. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by confusion. But we're married. On paper, yes, protects us both that way. He paused at the doorway. Rest up. I'll start dinner. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out how this works. As the door closed behind him, Josephine sank onto the bed, tears welling in her eyes. Not tears of fear or regret, but of profound gratitude. For the first time in years, someone had given her a choice. The following weeks established a routine that felt increasingly comfortable. Josephine rose early, preparing breakfast before Lucas headed out to work the ranch with his 2 hired hands, Miguel and Tobias. She spent her days cleaning the long neglected house, organizing supplies and preparing meals. In the evenings, they would sit at the kitchen table, Lucas teaching her about the ranch's finances and operations. You have a good head for numbers, he commented one night as she corrected a calculation in his ledger. My father let me manage the books at his store, she explained. It was the one thing he trusted me with. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. Would you like to take over the books here, be a real partner in this operation? A partner? The word felt foreign on her tongue. I thought I was just the housekeeper. You're my wife, at least according to that paper. Seems only right you know what you're part of. So began a deeper involvement in the ranch. Josephine learned about cattle prices, feed costs, and the complex economics of ranching in the high country. Lucas, she discovered, was a fair businessman, honest in his dealings and respected in Telluride, though he rarely socialized in town. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the mountains, Josephine finally shared her full story: her mother's death, her father's descent into alcoholism and gambling, and the final terrifying night with the shotgun. Lucas listened silently, his expression unchanging until she finished. He put a gun to your head. His voice was dangerously quiet. Yes. Josephine's hand unconsciously rose to her temple, where she sometimes still felt the press of cold metal. If he ever comes here, he won't, she interrupted. He doesn't know where I went, and even if he did, Telluride is too far from his whiskey and card games. Lucas nodded slowly, but the protective anger in his eyes stirred something inside Josephine, a warmth she hadn't expected to feel. As summer faded into autumn, their relationship shifted subtly. Conversations grew longer, silences more comfortable. Lucas began teaching Josephine to ride properly, not side saddle as she'd been taught in Denver, but astride like the ranch women of Colorado. Can't work cattle riding sideways, he explained, adjusting her posture on the gentle mare he'd selected for her. Sit deep in the saddle. Let your hips move with her. His hands on her waist, steadying her as she found her balance, sent an unfamiliar thrill through her body. The physical awareness of him, his strength, his scent of leather and pine became increasingly difficult to ignore. On a crisp October morning, Lucas announced they needed to ride the northern boundary to check fences before winter set in. It's a full day's ride, he warned. Think you're ready for that? Josephine nodded confidently. 2 months of daily riding had transformed her from a hesitant novice to a competent horsewoman. I am. The day was perfect for their journey, clear blue skies and aspen trees blazing gold against the evergreens. They rode side by side when the trail permitted, Lucas pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days on the ranch. Wasn't much more than a shack and some broken-down fences when I bought it, he said, as they paused to rest the horses near a stream. Previous owner died in a mining accident. His widow just wanted out. Why here? Josephine asked. Of all places to settle after the war, Lucas was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, fought for the Union, saw things no man should see. After, I couldn't stand being around too many people, needed space to breathe. Mountains seemed like a good place to start over. And have you started over? His eyes met hers, and for once he didn't look away. Getting there. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings, until a distant wolf howl broke the silence. We should keep moving, Lucas said. Still have the north corner to check. They rode for another hour before discovering a section of fence damaged by a fallen tree. Lucas dismounted, assessing the work needed. We can fix this enough to hold until I bring Tobias back tomorrow, he said, removing tools from his saddlebag. They worked together, clearing branches and repairing the fence. Josephine held post steady while Lucas hammered, their bodies close in the shared task. When the work was done, Lucas turned to help her remount her horse, but paused, his hands at her waist. You've changed, he said quietly. Have I? When you arrived, you were like a spooked colt. Now look at you riding boundaries, fixing fences. I had a good teacher, she replied, suddenly very aware of his proximity. Josephine. The way he said her name was different, softer, almost a question. Then his lips were on hers, tentative at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. The kiss deepened. his arms encircling her completely, and Josephine felt something inside her break free, a part of herself she'd kept carefully guarded even as she'd fled Denver. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan this when I answered your letter." "Nor did I," Josephine admitted, "but I'm glad it happened." The ride back to the ranch was charged with new awareness. They spoke little, but their glances held promises that needed no words. That night, Josephine didn't go to her room across the hall. Instead, she joined Lucas in his, discovering the tender passion possible between a man and woman who had chosen each other freely. In the quiet aftermath, lying in his arms, Josephine whispered, "Why did you really answer my letter?" "You could have found someone local." Lucas traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Truth. Your letter was different. Most women writing for husbands talk about being good Christian women, devoted and obedient. Yours just said practical arrangement and listed skills." Sounded like someone who knew their own worth. "I was desperate," she admitted. "We all are in our own ways." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But desperation that knows its value is something else entirely. That's survival." Winter in the high country was harsh but beautiful. Snow blanketed the ranch in pristine white, transforming the landscape into something magical. Inside, the house became a haven of warmth, both physical and emotional. Josephine and Lucas settled into their new relationship with surprising ease. During the day, they worked side by side, tending to winter chores, keeping livestock fed and watered through the frigid months. At night, they shared not just a bed but their deepening feelings, their dreams, their fears. "I never thought I'd feel safe with anyone again," Josephine confessed one evening as they lay entwined before the fireplace. "After my father." "You're safe here," Lucas promised, his voice fierce with conviction. "Always." As winter gave way to spring, Josephine realized she was late. The doctor in Telluride confirmed her suspicions with a broad smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Stone. I'd say you're about 2 months along. Baby should arrive in late November." The news transformed their lives once more. Lucas became both more protective and more open, sharing his hopes for their child as they prepared the second bedroom as a nursery. "Boy or girl doesn't matter," he insisted as he crafted a cradle from pine harvested on their own land. "Just want them to have what we didn't: safety, certainty." Josephine's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer, her body changing as the ranch flourished under their joint care. They'd expanded their herd, improved the irrigation from the creek, and even planted a small orchard that might bear fruit in a few years' time. On a warm September evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in spectacular colors, Lucas took her hand. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "When I sent that train fare, I was buying a housekeeper with a wedding certificate. Convenient for us both. And now," Josephine prompted, her free hand resting on her swollen belly, "now I want to marry you properly, not just on paper, in the church in town with people there to witness. I want to stand up and say vows I actually mean this time." Tears filled Josephine's eyes. "Lucas Stone, are you proposing to your own wife?" he smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Suppose I am. What do you say, Josephine? Will you marry me again, this time for the right reasons?" "Yes," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. 1,000 times yes." Their second wedding was held in Telluride's small white church on a perfect October day. The entire town seemed to attend: ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, and their families, all curious to witness the remarriage of the quiet rancher and his pregnant bride. Josephine wore a new dress of deep blue silk ordered specially from Denver, her mother's locket around her neck. Lucas stood tall in a new suit, looking both uncomfortable in the formal attire and immensely proud as she walked toward him on the arm of Miguel, who had happily agreed to give her away. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Josephine hardly heard the familiar words. All she could see was Lucas, his eyes never leaving hers as they repeated vows that now carried the weight of genuine love and shared experience. When he slipped a gold band onto her finger to join the simple one he'd purchased in their first hasty ceremony, Lucas added his own promise. "With this ring, I give you not just my name, but my heart, my life, and my solemn vow that you will always be free to be exactly who you are." The celebration afterward at the town hall was joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. Josephine, unable to dance much in her condition, sat watching Lucas speak with neighbors, noticing how he'd changed to more open, more at ease with others than when she'd first met him. "He's a different man since you came along," said Mrs. Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife, settling heavily into the chair beside Josephine. "Used to come to town, do his business, and leave without saying 10 words to anyone. Now look at him." Josephine smiled, watching as Lucas laughed at something the blacksmith said. "We've changed each other, I think." "That's what a good marriage does," Mrs. Peterson nodded sagely. "Sand and stone, wearing each other smooth over time." Their son, William James Stone, arrived 3 weeks later during the first snowfall of winter. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with the town's midwife guiding Josephine through the process while Lucas paced anxiously downstairs. When finally allowed to enter, Lucas approached the bed with uncharacteristic tentativeness, his eyes fixed on the small bundle in Josephine's arms. "Meet your son," she said softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a perfect face with Lucas's chin and a dusting of dark hair. Lucas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out one finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. When William reflexively grasped it, Lucas's breath caught. "He's strong," he whispered, "like his father, and beautiful like his mother." Lucas leaned forward to kiss Josephine's forehead, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Thank you. For what?" "For answering that advertisement. For taking a chance on a stranger. For giving me a family I never thought I'd have." Life with a new baby transformed their routine once more. Winter nights were often interrupted by William's hungry cries. Days punctuated by the small miracles of his development, his first real smile, the strengthening of his neck muscles, his growing awareness of the world around him. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, often wearing William in a sling across his chest as he handled the lighter ranch chores, telling his infant son about cattle breeding, weather patterns, and the history of their land in the same serious tone he might use with an adult. Spring brought new changes. A letter arrived from Denver that left Josephine pale and shaking. "What is it?" Lucas asked, immediately concerned. "My father," she whispered. "He's dead, apparently shot in a dispute over cards 3 months ago." She looked up, conflicted emotions playing across her face. "The lawyer says there's some property to settle. I'm his only heir." Lucas sat beside her, taking her hand. "Do you want to go back, handle it in person? I don't know." The Denver of her nightmares suddenly seemed far away, reduced to words on paper rather than an imminent threat. "Part of me never wants to set foot there again, but another part needs closure," Lucas finished for her. "Yes." She squeezed his hand gratefully. "Would you come with me?" "Bring William. Try to stop me," he said simply. The journey to Denver was strange for Josephine, both a homecoming and a return to a foreign land. The city had grown in the year and a half since she'd fled, but her father's mercantile on Larimer Street looked exactly as she remembered. Lucas carried William as they met with the lawyer, who explained that despite her father's gambling, The store and the building it occupied remained valuable assets. You could sell, of course, the lawyer suggested, or maintain ownership and hire a manager. Josephine walked through the store later that afternoon, memories flooding back with each familiar sight: the counter where she'd worked the ledgers, the storeroom where she'd hidden from her father's rages, the creaking stairs leading to their living quarters above. "He kept your room exactly as you left it," Lucas observed quietly as they stood in the doorway of her childhood bedroom. "Almost like he expected you to return." Josephine shivered, or wanted to preserve the evidence of his control. That night, in their hotel room with William sleeping peacefully in a borrowed cradle, Josephine made her decision. "I want to sell the store, but not the building," she told Lucas. "We could use the income from renting it, and maybe someday William might want to know where his mother came from. Not everything about my life here was darkness." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds wise. What about the apartment upstairs?" "I'd like to clear it out. Take my mother's things, donate the rest." "Whatever you need to do, I'm here." The process took a week: finding a buyer for the store inventory, arranging a rental agreement for the building, sorting through 2 decades of family possessions. Josephine worked methodically, facing each memory as it surfaced, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing as she shared stories with Lucas about her childhood before her mother's death. "She would have loved you," Josephine told him as she carefully packed her mother's china teacups. "And adored William." "Tell me about her," Lucas encouraged, and so she did: stories of a gentle woman who had taught her daughter to read, to garden, to stand straight even when afraid. By the time they boarded the train back to Telluride, Josephine felt lighter, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. Denver was no longer a place of nightmares, but simply a city where she had once lived: a closed chapter rather than an open wound. The ranch welcomed them home with the fresh green of late spring. Miguel and Tobias had managed well in their absence, but both men lit up at the sight of baby William, who had become a favorite among the ranch hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Stone," Miguel said, tipping his hat as he helped with their luggage. "It's good to be home," Josephine replied, realizing the profound truth in those simple words. This land, these mountains, this house they had built into a home, this was where she belonged now. That night, after William was asleep in his cradle, Lucas and Josephine sat on their porch, watching stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How strange life is," she answered. "2 years ago I was trapped with no way out but a desperate gamble on a stranger. Now here I am, wife, mother, ranch partner." She turned to face him. "Free in ways I never imagined possible." Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Freedom's a funny thing. Spent years thinking it meant answering to no one, standing alone. Then you arrived and showed me it can mean something else entirely." "What's that?" "The space to become who you're meant to be, alongside someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway." He pressed a kiss to her temple, exactly where a shotgun had once threatened to end her story before it truly began. "That's what you gave me, Josephine. And you gave it back to me, 100-fold," she whispered, leaning into his embrace as the night deepened around their mountain home. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranch life was demanding. Droughts threatened their cattle, harsh winters tested their endurance, and the fluctuating prices of beef sometimes strained their finances, despite the steady income from the Denver property. William grew into a sturdy boy with his father's quiet determination and his mother's quick mind. When he was 4, a sister joined the family, Elizabeth Rose, born on a summer morning with a shock of red hair and a cry that could be heard clear to the barn. "She's got your spirit," Lucas teased as Josephine nursed their daughter for the first time. God help us all, Josephine laughed. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Lucas and Josephine gradually expanded their operation, adding sheep on the higher pastures and experimenting with new breeds of cattle better suited to the mountain climate. The small orchard began producing apples and pears, and Josephine's vegetable garden became renowned in Telluride for its abundance. They built a second, larger house when the children were older, but kept the original as a guest house and office. The new home had a proper dining room for entertaining neighbors, a library filled with books for the children's education, and a wide wraparound porch where the family gathered on summer evenings to watch the sunset paint the mountains. Through it all, Lucas and Josephine's partnership deepened. They did not always agree. Josephine's progressive ideas sometimes clashed with Lucas's more traditional views, but they had learned to navigate differences with respect and a willingness to compromise. When William was 12 and Elizabeth 8, a letter arrived from Lucas's brother in Kansas. He was dying of consumption and wanted to see Lucas one last time. The entire family made the journey, Josephine supporting Lucas through the painful reunion and eventual loss. On the train ride home, Lucas held her hand tightly. "I keep thinking about what James said before we left about how he always thought I got the raw deal, heading west alone after the war with nothing but nightmares for company." He turned to look at her. "If he could see what I found instead." "He saw," Josephine assured him. "He saw us, our children, what we've built together." The children thrived as they grew. William, serious like his father but with his mother's compassion, showed a natural aptitude for ranch management. Elizabeth, fiery and independent, developed a remarkable talent for horses, training even the most difficult animals with patient determination. Telluride itself was changing too, growing more refined as silver mining brought wealth to the region. When the railroad finally reached the town in 1890, the isolation that had once defined their lives eased somewhat, bringing new opportunities and connections to the wider world. Josephine, now in her mid-30s, found herself increasingly involved in community affairs. She helped establish the town's first proper school, served on committees to improve conditions for miners' families, and even organized Telluride's first lending library. "Never thought I'd be married to such a rabble-rouser," Lucas teased after one particularly contentious town meeting where Josephine had argued passionately for allowing women to serve on the town council. "You knew what you were getting into," she retorted, eyes sparkling. "I advertised myself as practical, not docile." "Thank God for that," he murmured, pulling her close. As William approached 18, discussions about the future became more frequent around the family dinner table. The boy, nearly a man now, was torn between his love for the ranch and his curiosity about the wider world. "University might be worth considering," Josephine suggested one evening. "Denver has excellent programs in agriculture and business." Lucas, who had once might have resisted such notions, nodded thoughtfully. "Education never hurts, and the ranch will be here when you decide what you want." "What if I want both?" William asked. "Education and the ranch." Lucas and Josephine exchanged glances. "Then we figure it out together," Lucas said simply. "That's what family does." Elizabeth, at 14, rolled her eyes. "If William gets to go to university, then I'm going too when it's my turn." "Of course you are," Josephine assured her daughter, secretly pleased at her determination. "If that's what you want." Later that night, lying beside Lucas in the bedroom of the home they had built together, Josephine reflected on how far they had come from that first meeting at the Denver train station. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked softly. "That day when you met me at the station, did you ever think we'd be here, 20 years later, with grown children talking about university?" Lucas propped himself on one elbow, looking down at her with eyes that had not lost their intensity despite the silver now threading through his hair. Couldn't have imagined it. Was just hoping for someone who could cook a decent meal and keep the books straight. He smiled, tracing the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. Got the bargain of my life instead. As did I, Josephine whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. In the spring of William's 18th year, Lucas and Josephine traveled to Denver to help him settle into university. The city had transformed dramatically in the decades since Josephine had fled. Electric streetlights now illuminated the streets. Telephones connected businesses, and automobiles occasionally sputtered alongside horse-drawn carriages. They visited the old mercantile building, now housing a successful millinery shop that continued to provide steady income. Josephine stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the windows of her childhood home, feeling strangely distant from the terrified young woman who had once lived there. Strange to think, she mused, if my father hadn't been so cruel, I might never have left, never found you, never known what it meant to build a life of my own choosing. Lucas squeezed her hand. Some flowers only bloom after fire. William thrived at university, his letters home full of new ideas and experiences. Elizabeth, not to be outdone, devoted herself to her studies with the town schoolteacher, determined to follow her brother when her time came. The ranch continued to prosper under Lucas and Josephine's management. They had become fixtures in the community, respected, even revered by younger ranchers who sought their advice on everything from cattle breeding to water rights. When William returned from his first year at university, he brought news that would add another chapter to their family story. "I've met someone," he announced over dinner his first night home. "Her name is Anna Preston. Her father's a professor of literature." Josephine watched her son's face soften as he spoke of the young woman, recognizing the look of someone irrevocably changed by love. It was the same transformation she had experienced all those years ago, riding fence lines with a quiet rancher who had offered her freedom when all she'd expected was escape. William and Anna married 2 years later in Telluride's church, the same church where Lucas and Josephine had affirmed their own vows. The celebration afterwards spilled across the town and up to the ranch, with music and dancing lasting well into the night. Standing with Lucas at the edge of the gathering, watching their son dance with his bride, Josephine felt a profound sense of completion. "We did well, didn't we?" she said softly. Lucas pulled her closer, his arm warm around her waist. "Better than well. We broke the chain." She looked up at him questioningly. "My father was a hard man who showed no affection. Your father was a monster with a shotgun. But look at our son, the way he looks at Anna, the gentle way he holds her, and Elizabeth fierce and free, knowing her worth. The damage stops with us, Josephine. It doesn't pass to them." Tears filled Josephine's eyes at the simple truth of his words. "That's the real legacy, isn't it? Not the ranch or the herds or even the name. Just love freely given." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the newlyweds had left for their honeymoon journey, Lucas and Josephine walked hand in hand back to their home. The mountains stood silent witness to their passage, just as they had for nearly 3 decades of shared life. On the porch, Lucas paused, looking out over the land they had nurtured together. "Remember that first day I brought you here? You said it was beautiful, I said it was work." Josephine nodded, smiling at the memory. "We were both right," he continued. "But I didn't understand then that the beauty and the work are the same thing. That's what makes it valuable, the effort, the care, the tending." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Just like us." Josephine stood on tiptoe to kiss him, this man who had begun as her escape route and become her heart's true home. "Just like us," she agreed. Inside their house, built by their own hands and filled with memories of a life well lived, Lucas and Josephine Stone prepared for the next chapter of their journey together, older now, wiser perhaps, but still discovering new dimensions of the freedom they had found in choosing each other, day after day, year after year. And in the quiet of their bedroom, with moonlight spilling across the floor and the distant sound of the creek that had witnessed their beginning, Josephine whispered a truth she had learned through living. Freedom isn't the absence of bonds, it's choosing the ones that help you grow. Lucas gathered her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. And growing together, he added softly, even when the path isn't clear. Especially then, Josephine agreed, closing her eyes in perfect contentment, safe in the knowledge that the desperate gamble of her youth had yielded the richest of rewards, not just escape, but a life of authentic freedom, meaningful work, and enduring love. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, painting their world in the promise of another day together, Josephine Stone knew with absolute certainty that she had found what most people spend lifetimes seeking: not just a place to belong, but the courage to become fully herself, alongside a man who had undertaken the same remarkable journey. And that, she reflected as Lucas stirred beside her, was the most precious freedom of all.